Bueno, buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos a esta segunda jornada del Transmedia. Hoy vamos a tratar, ayer hablamos sobre todo de qué era el Transmedia y hoy vamos a tratar del Transmedia y la educación. Yo creo que ayer fue una jornada muy interesante, complementada con los talleres de la tarde, y hoy los talleres son solo para niños. Tenemos un colegio que vendrá aquí, entonces hoy habrá Transmedia por la tarde solo para niños. Como siempre, solo deciros las cosas básicas, que algunas estaban aquí hace un momento. Tenemos un hashtag para todo lo que tuiteéis, que es trans, o sea, T-R-A-N-S, Madrid, M-A-D, 2012. Hay una wifi en la sala, que es una que encontraréis con el nombre de servicios, y que tiene una palabra de paso que es wifi museo. Queríamos saludar también a la gente que nos está siguiendo en streaming y que suele ser pues 3 o 4 veces la gente que hay en la sala, y simplemente bueno pues desear que haya una buena jornada como la hubo ayer, e invitar ahora un momento a los ponentes a que empiece Robert, ¿no?, la primera sesión, y yo creo que Fernando lo va a ir presentando a cada uno de ellos. Fernando, para los que no estuvierais ayer, Fernando Carrión es el responsable de haber organizado todo esto y el verdadero padre de haber montado este evento. Fernando.
Hola, muy buenos días a todos, gracias por venir. Hoy es el segundo día del Transmedia Living Lab. Vamos a hablar de educación, vamos a hablar de niños, vamos a hablar de entornos colaborativos de aprendizaje, y va a ser una jornada ligeramente diferente a la de ayer, que hablamos de creación en sus distintas facetas y perspectivas. Quiero también dar las gracias a todos los que participaron ayer por la tarde en el taller de creación transmedia, que fue un auténtico exitazo. La verdad es que las historias fueron intensas y francamente pues muy enriquecedoras para todos. Hoy tendremos el mismo taller por la tarde, pero con niños, así que esperamos que se repita el éxito, pero de otra manera. El primer ponente del día va a ser Bill Boyd para vosotros, para los amigos. Y bueno, Bill es un consultor educativo especializado en todo lo que son nuevas plataformas, nuevas estrategias educativas en los entornos escolares, y nos va a contar su experiencia personal y profesional, y un poco las tendencias en ese sentido hacia dónde apuntan. Muchísimas gracias. Con vosotros, Bill Boyd.
I switch on all my technology here. Too much technology. We need to get rid of some of it. I'm actually here to kidnap a couple of footballers and take them back home for the Scottish national team. That's my real mission here. So watch out. Okay, I think we're just about ready to go. Okay, is that better? Thank you. Okay, thank you, and good morning. My own background is that I spent about 30 years as a secondary English teacher, and then I spent a year or two working for the Scottish National Curriculum Organisation called Learning and Teaching Scotland, and for the last 3 years I've been enjoying myself. After all of that, I felt it was time to do something interesting and useful. So, I'd like to tell you my experiences of how new texts, if you like, are beginning to impact on schools and on classroom practice. And I say beginning to impact because it's very early days, of course, in all of this. But it's also very exciting times, I think, for education generally, and particularly in terms of the use of transmedia. A very good friend of mine called Laura Fleming, who's a teacher librarian in New Jersey in the United States, describes the importance of transmedia like this. Laura says, "It allows educators to put the student at the centre of the learning process by allowing for a highly participative and creative kind of learning. It is a form of storytelling, like the best storytelling that has existed since human history began, that enables the learner to move on to create their own stories, or to shape existing stories in unique and individual ways. And I think that's quite an important statement. And I think that probably, for me, best sums up what transmedia is going to allow us to do in education. I'm also quite a fan of this English author, Christopher Booker, and his book, The 7 Basic Plots. The subtitle of the book is called Why We Tell Stories. And in the book, Booker describes why we tell stories, why stories are so important to us, to our existence, to our being. And the thought occurs to me that if narrative is so important, and as teachers have always recognised the importance of narrative in the classroom, we have always used narrative texts. But I think now this takes us a stage further. And I think we need to think not only of narrative as something that we use in the classroom, but actually to start thinking of learning as narrative. The learning process itself is about narrative. It's about creating narratives, and it's about understanding narratives. Or, to be grandiose about it, it's about understanding the world and explaining our place in it. I have another good friend. That's at least 2 friends I have, so that's pretty good for me. I have another good friend who is back home, who's a geography teacher. And he was teaching his kids, he's a secondary teacher, he was teaching kids about landscape and how landscape is formed. And he said, in his words, he said, it's quite a boring topic. And kids don't learn it very easily. I'm not quite sure how to get it across more effectively. And then he said he was reading something, because he's a good teacher, this guy, he reads and he learns as he goes. And he was reading something about narrative and storytelling. So what he did was he asked the kids to imagine that they were a river. And what they had to do was they had to tell the story of the river, either a particular river or any old river, and they had to tell the story of the river and the river's journey from the source to the sea. And the kids did this, and they wrote the stories, they recorded the stories, some of them recorded the stories on their phones, and they uploaded the podcasts to their class wiki, I think it was. And this is one of the stories. I hope we're able to play it.
I was born in the mountains in the north of Scotland. My youth flowed rapidly. It rained a lot, but I became fast and furious. I got into quite a lot of fights at the source of my life. I ran down steep slopes and fell onto the landscape, scraping against the rocks. My friends met me in the middle. Waterfalls happen sometimes, tears falling down below. My figure was slim and very narrow. I was given a part-time job to transport worn-away materials from the land around me. As I grew up, my job stress became more and more and started to drive me round the bend. I took many different paths along the way, almost like a braiding. My skin beginning to show wrinkles. I met new friends from all over, meeting me in places along the way. We joined together and made a pack, calling ourselves the Confluences. Many members joined after. I grew older, my mind wandered away, and I began to slow my life right down. I joined the elderly club called the Oxbow Lakes, and became more curvy in my figure. Levees built up around me, blocking everyone else out. My life became flat and boring. I often burst into floods and ended up watching TV alone among the wide channels. I became very weak and tired, and gave some of my belongings to the vast sea of people. Then my life ended, and I was buried under Delta rocks. My life had many ups and downs, but I enjoyed my long life to the fullest.
So I realise that that's a young child speaking with quite a heavy accent, and it's quite fast. But if you're able to listen to that carefully, what you realise is that young girl has obviously developed a very good understanding of metaphor, because she speaks in metaphors. She talks about developing curves in her middle years. She talks about her life becoming flat and boring in later years. So she follows, so the journey of the river, in a sense, metaphorically follows the journey of the person's life. So it's a very, very powerful way of learning the topic. I want to say a bit about Scotland's curriculum and curriculum development in Scotland, because we're very proud of it. We have fairly recently had quite a major review of the curriculum in Scotland, which has been happening really over the last 10 years or so. And the key difference in the curriculum is that our curriculum is now described in terms of outcomes for young people. It's no longer described in terms of inputs, as most curricula tend to be. This is what we are going to put into you this term. And at the end of it, we will test how much of it you've remembered. That's the traditional model, if you like. So we are trying to turn it on its head and to describe the curriculum in terms of outcomes, so that when you read the curriculum frameworks in our curriculum documentation, they're described in terms of I can statements. Every statement begins with I can. So the curriculum is described from the point of view of the learner. And this is quite a shift in our thinking. We aren't by any means there yet. There's quite a long way to go, but at least we're trying. The picture on your left probably resembles my primary school when I went to school. In fact, I wondered when I found the photograph whether I was actually in it for a minute or two. And that's what school used to be like. The picture on the right is, I hope, what schools are more and more becoming like. So Curriculum for Excellence, as we called it, has 4 components, 4 purposes, if you like, 4 main purposes of our curriculum. And these are to enable all young people to become successful learners, confident individuals, responsible citizens, and effective contributors. Now, all four of these purposes have equal weighting. The weighting in traditional curricula has tended towards developing successful learners. And in fact, you might argue that even in traditional models, sometimes we don't develop successful learners. We develop young people who become successful at passing tests and exams, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're successful learners, because a successful learner, as you know, has many more attributes than that. But we're also at the same time paying equal attention to confident individuals, responsible citizens, effective contributors to the wider community and the wider society. Now, it's easy to say these things, but of course the big challenge is actually doing them. And one of the challenges we have, and I suppose I'm guessing you have as well, is that we still have a very traditional examination academic structure. So as long as we have a very strict academic structure with entrance to university and so on, it's very difficult to convince people that these other 3 elements are equally important to exam results. Very difficult to convince them. At the same time, what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at our definition of literacy. And we're of course realizing, as most of the world is realizing, that the old definitions of literacy just don't fit anymore. They just don't do it. So while it's still important that we develop reading, writing skills as they were, it's equally important that we develop other kinds of skills as well. And again, important in all of that, I think, is our definition of texts. And this is critical here when we're talking transmedia, because when we talk about texts, we need to be clear that we are also talking about oral texts, electronic texts, film, transmedia text, and so on. Now, this is actually written. I've taken this from our curriculum documentation. And of course, many teachers will read that and think, yeah, that makes sense. And then do nothing to change the practice. Because it's easy to acknowledge that these texts exist. But let's face it, we've had film, we've had moving image for 100 years, over 100 years. And yet, largely, it's either ignored in classrooms, or it's used in classrooms simply as an alternative means of transmission, if you like, of the message, rather than studying the text in itself. Which brings me to a particular transmedia text which I'd like to talk about this morning, and that's a text that I met a couple of years ago, and it's called Inanimate Alice. And I don't know whether any of you will be familiar with Inanimate Alice already. Is anybody familiar with it? Yeah, one or two people are nodding. But Inanimate Alice is a beautiful text, and it's a digital novel. It's online. It isn't all there yet, and I'll explain why. But it's entirely free. The key things about Alice, and I'll show you the text in a minute. The key things are that it was born digital. It isn't a printed book which was digitized for Kindles or whatever. It was actually born digital. It was made digital. It's a quality text. Now that in itself can be a controversial term. But what I mean by that is that if, as teachers, we're going to introduce text to the classroom, then what we do, part of our role, I would suggest, and feel free to question me on this, part of our role, I would suggest, is to quality assure the texts that we use in the classroom. Now, some people may well disagree entirely with that, but I think part of our role as teachers is to quality assure texts, and I think this is a quality text. It's interactive, it's transmedia, it's a multicultural experience because, as you will see, Alice, the central character, in each of the episodes of the story travels around the world, which provides the ideal opportunity for Alice to be in any number of different cultural situations. And it's potentially, for me, a complete curriculum. Interestingly, Alice was not written with education in mind at all. It was not written for an educational audience. It was written purely as an entertainment. In fact, it was written as the backstory to a screenplay which its creator, Ian Harper, wrote after attending a screenplay writing seminar with David Putnam in London. So Alice became the backstory to the screenplay, and the screenplay has never been made yet. And the other good thing about the text for me, as looking at it from a teacher's point of view, is that it's progressively more challenging, because within each of the episodes, and you'll see there is some printed text on the screen, the text becomes more difficult as you go through the episode. And as you go through each of the episodes, again, it becomes increasingly more difficult. Some of the reactions from teachers, they like it. In a nutshell, teachers like it, kids generally like it. Now, what I'm going to try to do now is come out of that, and if I can, I'd like to play you an episode of the first episode of Inanimate Alice. And if you just give me a second to grab my headphones so that I can hear the translation into English, which is a bit weird. So that's Inanimate Alice, and I want to just say a little bit perhaps about how I've seen teachers using Inanimate Alice in the classroom. To go back briefly to Curriculum for Excellence again in Scotland, one of the literacy outcomes we have, and you remember I spoke about outcomes for young people, one of the literacy outcomes is this one, and it strikes me that Inanimate Alice lends itself perfectly to this outcome, and probably to, I'm sure there are many other transmedia texts, again, which lend themselves to this. And it's about creation, of course. And I want to tell you, again, I want to just quickly flick through a version of Inanimate Alice, which this young girl made. Because one of the first things that kids tend to do when they see Inanimate Alice is that they want to create their own episode, naturally. And they want to set their own episode in their own place, because it's about that sense of identity and place, and this is my place and I'm proud of it, kind of thing. So Megan, who is 13, Megan has set her story in Glasgow. And I'll just tell you a little bit about Megan before I show you her story, her version of Inanimate Alice. Megan is a little girl who, she's in what we call our second year of secondary school. She doesn't take part in very much. In fact, she doesn't take part in anything, really. She comes into class, she's very quiet, she's very introverted. She doesn't like discussion, she never answers questions. She doesn't do particularly well in school, she doesn't read. And she doesn't even relate particularly well to her peers. So the teacher, whom I know personally, she's my partner as it happens, she introduces Inanimate Alice to the class. And of course they set about making their own episode of Alice. And Megan starts to sit up and pay some attention. And this is Megan's story in Glasgow. I'll just have to try to guess the average reading age of the audience, if you don't mind, and just go through it at a pace. So this is Megan's version of Inanimate Alice in Glasgow. And Brad becomes a kind of Glaswegian Brad, skateboarding through the streets of Glasgow. And there's a dog, of course, because children like dogs. And most of them have a dog. So they want to bring in pictures of their dog or somebody else's dog. Because pets are a very good starting point for teachers. So she's going to ask her mum about a pet. So she's picked that up from Alice, from the real virtual Alice, of course. And of course her mum is having none of it, because again she's picked up that parents sometimes don't like you to have a pet, because they realise that you'll look after the pet for a week and then you'll stop looking after it, and mum will have to look after it. So she has another kind of dog here. All of a sudden she's got a different dog. So Brad is the person she speaks to. And kids like the idea of a virtual friend like Brad, because, well, I suppose we've all got a virtual friend, haven't we, really, in one shape or form, that we need to go and talk to, or a real friend even, if we have one, if we're lucky enough. Remember I told you I had two. So they like the idea of Brad the friend, and they like the idea of creating little animations. Now at this point I would have to say that the teacher, who's an English teacher, is a little bit of a technophobe. She doesn't do technology, by and large. She's of a generation like me. She's of an older generation, so she doesn't get technology, and she's scared of it. Doesn't use it if she can avoid it. But the kids are not scared of it, so they teach each other. So by this point, the kids are teaching each other how to put a little animation in PowerPoint. Now, if you're working in transmedia or in technology, then you think, hey, what's the big deal? But for many, many teachers, certainly in Scotland, and I'm guessing in other parts of the world as well, even the most simple basic technology is a bit scary. And they need time, and they need confidence, and they need people to help them through that. So here comes Brad and the dog. Here comes the argument with Mum about the dog. And again, the discussions with parents is a theme that every young person can relate to. And she's so proud of creating Brad and showing Brad off to her mum. And her mum says an interesting thing, and probably a predictable thing. Her mum says, this Brad thing has to stop. It was okay when you were little, but you're 17 years old now. You're too old for imaginary friends. So it's that kind of conflict, if you like, between the young person and the parent. And she takes the backseat from me and walks out of the room. So Megan, alias Alice, makes a video call to Aisha, and Aisha is Alice's tutor. She is Iranian, and she's Alice's online tutor, because remember, Alice travels all around the world. And you'll notice here in this slide that Megan has even picked up on the point that the icon for each of the pages appears in the top right hand corner of the screen, and she has translated. It doesn't actually, it's not interactive in her version, but she's actually starting to pick up, even if you like, on the technological aspects of the story, that this is built into the story, that you can go back. If you're 3/4 of the way through the story, you can very quickly go back to a particular page, which is very useful for teachers as well as kids. And Aisha's on holiday, but she answers and asks her what's wrong. Ming tells Aisha that she's getting worried about Alice, and Aisha says, maybe Alice just needs a friend. You could send her to public school. At least that way she could get some real friends. And one of Alice's desires throughout the story is to go to a school where she can meet real friends and make real friends. But because her parents are travelling all the time, she's never actually in a real school. Although I'll let you into a wee bit of a secret. By the time she's about 15 or 16, they moved to England, and she goes to a real school for the first time. But every young person relates to that, well, every person relates to that need for friends, that need for empathy, which is kind of missing from her life. And it's kind of missing from Megan's life at this point as well, so she understands it. So that's Megan's version of episode 1 of Inanimate Alice, or episode 5 in Glasgow. And Megan's comment at the end of all of that process is, I enjoyed doing this because it gave us a chance to use our imaginations. Now, the implication of that, of course, is that normally when Megan goes to school, she doesn't get a chance to use her imagination. That's the suggestion, that normally she doesn't get a chance to use her imagination. Normally she's having things told to her, which she is having to try to remember. And things that she doesn't particularly relate to often, she doesn't understand the need for them. But by turning the process on its head and making Megan the creator of the story, then we're empowering Megan, if you like. We're putting the power in her hands, so that ultimately she, Megan, should be able to say, yes, I have met that literacy outcome. I can create texts which do X, Y, and Z. And she can honestly say it because she's done it. And this, for me, this related to something that Henry Jenkins says in Convergence Culture. We should imagine, he says, that this is no longer a process where adults teach and children learn. We should see it as a space where children teach one another, and where, if they would open their eyes, adults could learn a great deal. So part of that message is that to be effective teachers now, teachers first and foremost have to be learners, or co-learners if you like, learning with. It's a journey together. Alice in the curriculum is developing. Teachers around the world are recognising the potential of it in all areas of the curriculum. So Alice's school reports are now appearing on the Alice website. And Alice's school reports are really telling the stories of how teachers and kids are engaging with Alice around the world. You'll find these on the Inanimate Alice website. And Alice's latest move is into Australia. And I'll tell you briefly why Australia is significant. It's significant because it's one of those countries in the world where many, many teachers were using Alice, had picked up on it. I think a lot of it was simply by word of mouth. One or two people started using it who told one or two other people, and so on, and it kind of spread like that. At the same time, I think when you look at the Australian curriculum, I think they're quite forward-thinking and innovative in terms of describing their curriculum, and Inanimate Alice has actually made it onto their list of texts for the English and literacy curriculum. It's made it onto the list of texts. And I'm quite excited about that because not only has it made it onto the list of texts, along with all the other conventional texts for English classrooms, but it's made it onto the list of texts under the heading fiction. Now, they have a list of texts in there called digital media, I think, or some such thing. And Inanimate Alice is not listed under digital media. It's listed under fiction. Because effectively, this is where reading is going. It's not an alternative form of reading. It is reading. It's what books and texts are becoming. This is reading. And it's not the future, it's the present. And this is, I think, what teachers have to realise. But that's also what's so exciting about it, of course. So Alice is on that list of texts in Australia. The Alice network is spreading through social media like Twitter. I forgot what it was called for a minute. And I'm sure many of you realise the significance of Twitter in terms of making connections. If you're familiar with Cheryl Nussbaum-Beach's work, The Connected Educator, she talks about the importance of teachers being connected nowadays. And it's so true. And the same is true for kids as well. They need to be connected with each other and sharing. Alice's Facebook page, and this is a screenshot from Alice in Everloop, which is, I think I've got this right, is the American version of Facebook for under 13s. So Alice has found her way into Everloop for kids, and on the Everloop page, because it's for kids, younger kids, they provide things like Alice badges and competitions to draw Brad and so on. I want to just show you a trailer if I can, again, if I can get this to work. I want to show you a trailer for... Maybe I need to do that. And... okay, hoping this will work this time. So what the Inanimate Alice team has done, if you like, that's the team of writers, artists and so on, is that they've agreed with Education Services Australia to provide Australia with 12 mini-stories over the course of a year. In episode 1 of Alice, she's 8 years old, as you saw, and they're in China. In episode 2, by episode 2, they've moved to Italy, and Alice is 10. So they've agreed with Education Services Australia that between the ages of 8 and 10, Alice and her family moved to Melbourne and spent a year in Melbourne, and that there will be 12 mini-stories set in and around Melbourne. We've also agreed to provide them with a page of suggested literacy activities around each of the mini episodes, which I am writing. But the really interesting thing about it for me is that they're also providing the teachers and the kids not only with the episode, online episode, but with the digital assets. So the teacher and the kids get the story in the form of a comic book if they want it, like this, PDF. They get the digital assets, they get printable sheets of the text, they get the photographs from the story, they get sketches, they get the music, they get sound effects, they get graphics, and so on. So what the kids can do, and they can do it by downloading this tool, which is called a Snappy tool, which apparently they had in Australia already. I'd never heard of it. It's like a kind of PowerPoint for young kids. Nice, very simple. You can import photographs and pictures and just put a little bit of text on it yourself. It's called a Snappy tool. So from the dedicated Australian website of Alice, kids can download the Snappy tool, they can download the assets to the story, and they can mash up their own version of the story. So the kids are creating the story. So it's the creation that is the key part of all of that. Teachers will all be very familiar with Bloom's taxonomy and the development of higher order thinking skills, if you like, from remembering through understanding, applying, right up through to creating at the top of the pyramid. Creating being, I suppose, the ultimate learning weapon, if you like. But I read something really interesting recently on somebody's blog, and they were suggesting that maybe we should flip the triangle or the pyramid on its head and actually start with creating. Because if you have it like that, the temptation is to think that before we can have people creating something, we need to have them doing all the other things first. So they need to build up all these layers of remembering, understanding, applying. And then maybe, if they ever get to the top of that pyramid, we allow them to create. But maybe we've got it the wrong way around. Maybe we should start with creating. It's messy. Just start with the messy stuff. Just get in there and be messy and create. And then worry about evaluating, analysing. And finally, if you have to, if you're sitting an exam next week, think about remembering. Maybe. Thank you very much for listening. I'll be perfectly happy to take questions.
Hola, ¿se oye? Hola, si tenéis alguna pregunta y queréis hablar directamente por allí, una pregunta. Bill, vete si te hago. Okay.
Good morning. Thanks a lot for the... I'm here. Thanks a lot for the presentation. I would like to ask you if you can tell us a little bit more about the business model. How do you create everything? How do you finance it?
That's a very good question. You asked me if I have a business model.
Yes, actually.
How
because I am a producer, so I am interested about how do you create everything, how do you distribute it, and how do you put it in the school and everything.
Okay. I have no idea. Let me explain. I am not a producer, and I'm not a business person at all. I am the least business-like person you have ever met. I'm an English teacher. So when I discovered Inanimate Alice, I started to blog it on my blog and talk about it and talk about teachers using it and so on. So Ian Harper, whose baby this is, he contacted me and said that people were coming to the Inanimate Alice website through my blog, which was good for him and good for me. So I started talking to him, and I started to convince him, I think, of the educational potential for Alice, because he wasn't thinking education. He was just thinking. So he made, with his own money, I guess, I don't ask him much about money, but I guess with his own money, they made 4 episodes of Alice online. It's written by a Canadian author called Kate Pullinger, and the artist is a guy called Chris Joseph, who's English. So they made 4 episodes online, but the story arc, the whole complete story arc of 10 episodes is actually written, complete, but not online, because they will be very expensive. So at the moment, he is trying to do what you're describing. He's trying to find the money from a big organisation, from a particular organisation, which I won't name, to try to fund the making of the rest of the episodes. Okay? So that's the point where he is. So in terms of models, the Australian mini series, Education Services Australia paid for that, but they didn't pay a huge amount of money. But I guess the theory is that as Alice develops and becomes more global, attracts the attention of a big multinational corporation who may be prepared to invest a big amount of money in, first of all, to finish the episodes, and secondly, to develop curriculum materials. Because I have given quite a bit of my own time for nothing. And I have developed a mind map of potential curriculum development for Alice in every curriculum area. But at the moment, they are just ideas. To actually develop them properly will take some investment. So I don't know whether that answers your question entirely.
Yeah, it's okay. The second question is more creative aspect. Why do you decide to write a story instead of telling the story? I mean, why the main character is expressed by text instead of by a voice-over, for example?
Right. I don't really know the answer to that question. Gosh, that's really interesting, because that's a question I have never asked Ian Harper. I've never asked him that. Mayus, have you any idea why the text was created with printed text on the screen rather than a voiceover narrative?
I think it is because it's a mix of, the intention is that the reader can imagine or think or give sense to its own perception.
Yeah.
So if some tells the story, maybe there's no
it's a particular voice. It's somebody else's voice. Yeah. And interestingly enough, we don't see Alice, and I think that's a plus, because you can imagine Alice.
And also there's a background and a sound there, so if there's someone reading, it gives you that.
Yeah, I guess these are the reasons. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
A ver, hay una pregunta más al fondo por allí. ¿Alguna pregunta más por aquí? Nos dicen de Twitter que tenemos una pregunta.
Sí. Bueno, hay una pregunta aquí en Twitter que yo no la entiendo, pero la voy a leer tal y como viene, que dice, es una pregunta para Bill, que dice, ¿qué hay del trabajo de Lyotard y la crisis de los metarrelatos de legitimación en Transmedia? Vamos, seguro que es una pregunta seria, pero que yo no la...
I'm sure it's a serious question, but I don't understand it. Is this an educationist?
Yeah, it's related with Lyotard is a postmodern essayist, and I think that he's asking about a question about identity through the text.
All right, I'm not familiar with that writer, so if somebody could simplify it for me, is there a simple concept, maybe? It needs to be simple. It needs to be simple for me.
A mí, antes de que se nos acabe el tiempo, me gustaría introducir un elemento que creo que Bill, en ese sentido, ha puesto un poquito el dedo en uno de los temas que vamos a abordar a lo largo del día. Uno ha dicho el tema de que estamos hablando, no estamos hablando de futuro, estamos hablando de presente. Eso es un tema que yo creo que es muy importante incidir. Hay muchas voces en el panorama educativo, no ya español, sino internacional, que están hablando y apostando firmemente por un cambio. Todos tenéis en mente personajes como Sir Ken Robinson, entre otros, que bueno, es uno de los vídeos que yo creo que prácticamente más vueltas ha dado y que está dando sobre todo mucho que hablar en ese sentido. Entonces hay que cambiar el paradigma, todo el mundo coincide en que sí, en que hay que apostar por la creatividad, de que hay que apostar por la coparticipación, la co-creación, hay que conseguir que los entornos educativos sean entornos de aprendizaje abiertos, colaborativos, más orgánicos, con un concepto mucho más holístico. Y todas estas cosas realmente, para que no se nos queden en simple buenas intenciones, hay que darles forma. Para darles forma necesitamos proyectos. Bill ha puesto un ejemplo, que es Inanimate Alice. Hay muchos otros, por supuesto. De hecho, cada vez hay más. Son proyectos que además poco a poco van tomando forma. De hecho, muchos de los que estáis aquí sentados en esta sala, me gustaría que levantaréis las manos. ¿Cuántos de vosotros desarrolláis o habéis tenido relación directa con la co-creación de contenidos digitales para entornos educativos o para niños? Pues hay un montón de manos. Yo sé que muchos de vosotros habéis venido y muchos de los que nos están siguiendo por streaming es gente que está trabajando directamente en contenidos. Muchos de ellos, la gran pregunta es ¿qué hago para que mi proyecto tenga visibilidad? ¿Cómo puedo contactar con los grandes editores? Los grandes editores muchas veces están más perdidos que vosotros porque tienen unas estructuras bestialmente complejas y cualquier pequeño movimiento requiere una grandísima preparación, con lo cual están perdiendo el elemento de la frescura, ese elemento que da realmente a nivel creativo lo que ha dicho Bill, tenemos que recuperar y tomar como referencia a los niños. Entonces me gustaría que Bill incida un poquito más en su experiencia personal en un elemento que para mí es importante, que es clave, que es un poco qué es lo que deberíamos cambiar, simplemente, qué debería cambiar.
Yeah, thank you, Fernando. One of the difficulties for education systems, if you like, this is something we spoke about this morning. I mean, even same in Scotland, it's no different in Scotland, is that we have this newly described curriculum in Scotland, which on paper is good, is really good on paper. But of course, the curriculum isn't on paper; it's in schools and classrooms and teachers. So, is translating that into reality is challenging, especially, I would suggest, in a secondary school, because traditionally in secondary school we learn subjects. Now, in real life, we don't learn subjects. Nobody ever learns in subjects in real life. Single subject. You know, I am going to learn to cook an egg. Now I'm going to learn to empty a cereal packet. Now I'm going to learn to, and then I'll have breakfast. You don't learn that way. But in school we learn that way. So now we are going to English. Now we are going to physics. Now we are going to geography. Why? Because that is how the examination system works, and that's how universities work, and that's where the school education system comes from. But for the majority of the population, That's not where they're going. That's not where they're going. But they all have to fit that same model. So that's what needs to change. That's what needs to change. Because if we are genuine in Scotland and in the world, if we are genuine about a curriculum which develops young people who are successful learners, effective contributors, confident individuals, responsible citizens, genuinely in the round, that's what needs to change. That's what we need to do. And if you have an inspection system in schools, which I guess you have, we certainly have, that inspection of schools needs to change. So that when you inspect a school, you don't only inspect the examination results. And that's what happens at the moment. They look at your examination results, and maybe you have a league table, and maybe you're at the bottom, like you're a crap school, excuse my language. You're a rubbish school because you're at the bottom of the table. Okay, you do some good things with the children, you're very good social things with the children, but that's okay. But what really matters are your examination results. That's what needs to change, I think.
Tenemos una pregunta, bueno, dos preguntas, una por allí.
Thanks a lot for your talk. I love your ideas, and I think we need to change one thing more. I think the school needs to be open to the society. Because let me tell you an example. I love your presentation about this slide at the beginning when the movement are all together with the test. Mm-hmm. At the beginning, I was thinking that it was a kid who was doing that. And then I said, wow, how this kid do that? And then, when I was checking the transparency, and I said it was a PowerPoint and 2 pictures. And from my view, and many people, I am from education, but now I moved to media. And I learn a lot of things from media people. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's not just to put technology into a school. Because many people, like me or like many others who are here, we need to know how to teach this new language. Mm-hmm. And from my view, many teachers don't know about that. Yeah. Even teachers at the university.
Yeah.
I was asking yesterday to Henry Jenkins about quality, and he told me the best thing in YouTube is that you have very different qualities and people know how they can learn more. Looking at the others, think, I am like abogar, I don't know how it's said in English, I am like proposing that media people and educators need to collaborate, yeah. Even industries. Much more examples like this from this afternoon here. Sorry about that, but I think collaboration between media and educator is really necessary, and I think that kids need to learn this media language, because in the same way that they need to learn to write, they learn to learn media language. They
sure.
don't...
Sure.
Sorry about that. I was
yeah.
really long.
No, I think you have a very good point about schools and communities. Absolutely, and of course, what the internet has meant in many schools in many countries, including my own, is that there's a huge amount of negativity has grown up around it, so that many people's immediate thoughts are not, what can we do with this, but how can we stop it? You know, and it's usually in the form of, it usually comes under the disguise of protection and security. We cannot allow kids to do this because it's dangerous. But it's like saying, okay, as you grow up, you are never going to be allowed to cross to the other side of that main road because it's dangerous. So we will just keep you on this side of the road, much safer. So until you die, you stay here, right? And that's why that doesn't happen to the extent that it should happen. That the schools are more open to communities and working with communities. Again, when I go back to our curriculum and the way the curriculum is written, it is very much written in a way that learning is the responsibility of everyone, not just the teacher. The curriculum is written that way, But again, in reality, when you go into many classrooms, they are closed. And so we do need to look at changing that. But we need to do it not by threatening teachers, of course. We need to do it by supporting teachers and empowering them, giving them what they need.
Y además me gustaría introducir un elemento para un poco encender un poco el debate entre la gente. Yo no sé vosotros lo que pensáis de todo esto, bueno, desde hace unos ya bastantes años que se habla de educación 2.0, aulas digitales equipadísimas como si fueran, no sé, hiper mega complejos tecnológicos, una metodología cuando menos a veces inexistente, a veces cuestionable, a veces peor incluso, yo diría que podemos estar incluso hablando de un proceso de domesticación tecnológica que yo personalmente no comparto, es mi opinión, ya lo dejo claro, y creo que también depende muchas veces qué queremos formar, o sea, ¿por qué? ¿Cuál es el propósito? Lo que preguntaba Ken Robinson cuando lo entrevistaba a Punset en uno de los programas, decía, ¿hacia qué nos dirigimos? ¿Qué queremos crear? ¿Ciudadanos educados y obedientes que sigan las reglas del sistema? Pues entonces a lo mejor lo que tenemos que plantearnos es qué queremos conseguir. Y no nos olvidemos, porque es muy fácil echarle la culpa a los educadores. Es decir, es que los educadores no se adaptan, desconocen la tecnología, no son capaces de llegar al nivel de los niños. Los niños se ríen de los profesores porque no saben cómo encender una pizarra digital o no saben cómo conectarse a Facebook. Eso es una manera, digamos, de distraer del problema real. Los educadores, que es lo que decía Bill, necesitan que se les dé esa oportunidad de poder primero entrar en el debate de una manera efectiva, saber, o sea, esa voluntad que realmente existe, traducirla a metodologías que funcionen. Yo creo que un poco en el debate que tendremos luego en la mesa redonda después de la segunda ponencia, que os invito a todos a que un poco preparéis preguntas para la mesa redonda, podemos discutir un poco el telón de fondo que yo creo que es un poco importante, ¿no? ¿Hacia dónde se dirige la educación del siglo XXI? ¿Qué es lo que queremos realmente transmitir a los niños y si realmente lo estamos haciendo bien?
Could I just say very briefly, Fernando, because you used an expression there about obedient citizens, which I thought was really relevant, because education systems traditionally have taught, if you like, young people to be obedient, or tried to teach young people to be obedient citizens. And the expression we have in our curriculum, of course, is responsible citizens, and I think that's a shift that we need to make as well. We don't want, well, we kind of want obedient citizens, kind of, but we want responsible citizens, and we want citizens who are taking part in the democratic process. And our young people are not taking part in the democratic process anymore because they just don't think they're a part of it.
¿Tenemos alguna pregunta más? Una pregunta por aquí. ¿Micrófono? No, el micrófono está ahí. ¿Aló? No.
Good morning.
Hi.
I wanted to know if some of you heard about the Design for Change movement, Kiran Bir-Sethi.
No.
So she launched 3 years ago a project called Design for Change, where she involved children in co-designing spaces where they could rethink the education system. And now you have 25 million children who have been involved in 35 countries. And I thought it would be interesting to put that also here, because let's not reinvent the hot water. There are things happening.
Yeah.
So let's build on that. I don't know if you'd have a thought on that.
Un momento, Alok. Es importante que lo que ha mencionado Alok, que no olvidemos, hoy tenemos una jornada sobre educación y transmedia, pero esto forma parte de un mismo hilo conductor que empezó ayer hablando de creación, en la que hablamos también de niños y de mayores. Hoy estamos hablando de educación, mañana vamos a hablar de cambio social. Y no olvidemos que esto no son piezas separadas, son piezas de un mismo puzzle. Por eso todo lo que estamos comentando hoy perfectamente tiene mucha relación con lo que comenta Alok, con el ejemplo de lo del agujero en el muro que comentabais ayer, con el tema de cómo la tecnología se integra realmente en todos estos entornos colaborativos, ya sea para crear, para aprender, que tampoco hay tanta diferencia realmente a la hora de hablar de creación, y de hecho creación y educación deben ir ligados, que esos son los puntos que Bill ha incidido. Yo os invito a todos un poco a reflexionar sobre ello, pero creo que has puesto encima de la mesa un elemento que puede dar juego. Bien.
And just a quick comment to complement. In your last slide before this one, there was the word evaluation. And I would like to see in the panel a thorough discussion about how evaluation is impacting the design of systems in which we are.
Good. Okay. No?
How evaluation?
No?
If it's burning now.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because in one sense I could be quite flippant and say it doesn't matter. And what I mean by that is that my focus till now has been on if we are defining literacy in our schools, and we are defining texts in our schools, what we use as texts in our schools, then the key things for me are what are the texts which are relevant and which work and which matter. Because there's no point in preparing young people for the 20th century. We have schools in my country where we are preparing children excellently well for the 20th century. What's the point? But if, to take your question seriously about evaluation and impact, I'm currently embarking on some research with some people at Wolverhampton University in England to look at the impact on literacy of using Inanimate Alice in the classroom, so that there will be some hard evidence, if you like, of the fact that engaging with texts like this in the classroom is actually going to improve young people's literacy in the broadest sense. Now, for me, that's got two strands. The first strand is, does it improve traditional literacies? Does it improve a young person's ability to speak and listen and discuss and read and write? If you like, traditional literacy. Does using text like this in the classroom improve these skills? That's the first thing. And the second question for me is, does it also improve, if you like, for want of a better word, their digital literacy? Does it improve their understanding of media? Because the teachers and the kids, they need a better understanding of media. So, two aspects, and we need to find out. The simple answer is, at the moment, we don't really know. But there's no alternative. The alternative is to find a time machine and go back. There is no alternative.
Tenemos otra pregunta por aquí.
¿De qué edades? ¿De qué los niños que están trabajando con Alice, de qué edades son? ¿Y es en todas las escuelas que se implementa, o es de acuerdo a la creatividad de cada maestro que utiliza como una estrategia o como una herramienta dentro de su salón de clases?
It's currently being used in only a very small number of schools. Only by those people who have found it, if you like. So it's not national. It's not widespread at all. Only by those people who are trying to push the boundaries a bit and find new things. But it's still quite a small minority of teachers who are using it, or who are using texts like. I know a few teachers who are using games like Machinarium and. Purely as, if you like, as context for creativity and writing, beautiful context. But of course, with text, there is no printed text with something like Machinarium. But kids can write the story, of course. The other part of your question, the first part of your question was age. And generally speaking, it's kids between 10 and 14, 10 to 14, more or less. Sometimes slightly older, but generally 10 to 14 age group, which is good, because that can be quite a difficult age group to find good texts for. But one of the other things I do is I spend quite a lot of my time developing and talking about moving image text or film, using short films in the classroom, plain and simple. And I've done quite a bit of work with Creative Scotland, which used to be called Scotland on Screen, in using short films in the classroom and if you like, teaching teachers what to do with the films. And teaching teachers a basic understanding of the language of film, like basic understanding, camera angles and camera shots and sequence and so on, just very, very simple. Because again, teachers are scared of it. They're scared of it. They think it's very technical, they think they won't understand it, so they just don't do it.
Tenemos dos preguntas por aquí.
Tengo otra pregunta que ha venido por Twitter y es ¿qué añade formativamente usar un lenguaje transmedia si el medio es parte del mensaje curricular?
What does it formally add? Formally, I think.
No, ¿qué añade formativamente usar un lenguaje transmedia? ¿Qué añade en la formación? Y si el medio es parte del mensaje curricular.
What does it add to the curriculum? And what is the message for training? I think was the gist of the question. What it adds to the curriculum is fun, apart from anything else, relevance, excitement, creativity, buzz, everything. It adds everything to the curriculum. The implications for training are huge because we need to train all our teachers in. It's not for me. It's about. As I keep reminding you, I have no technical expertise at all in anything. I just use stuff, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So, I did it. I think called Teach Meet last weekend, which is an informal meeting of teachers, and we had about a dozen teachers doing 2-minute presentations, very fast. We had a Twitter stream, and we had live stream, and we had PowerPoints, and we had all sorts of things, and the technology kept failing, but we still had the presentations. Teachers still spoke about what they did in their classrooms, and it was very successful. So we have to also remind ourselves that, and we have to try to reassure teachers in a sense that the key thing about all of this in education is it's not really about the technology. Let's just kind of use the technology we have and get over it. It's about the ideas and the creativity and the learning from it. That's the key thing. And if the technology sometimes doesn't work, it doesn't matter. We've got huge issues in our schools in the UK at the moment about kids and mobile phones. They're banned, mainly. Smartphones are banned in schools. So the very technology that most kids have, they aren't allowed to bring into school. Or if they are allowed to bring it in, they have to switch it off. But they can go to Starbucks and get free Wi-Fi and learn stuff. It doesn't make sense.
Yo creo que luego podemos ahondar un poco más porque yo creo que hay elementos que la pregunta se ha quedado como muy corta. Creo que faltan más cosas. De todas maneras, como no vamos a mantener todo esto para la mesa redonda después. ¿Hay otra pregunta después?
Sí. Okay. I don't know if you're familiar with the John Gans Cooney Center in the U.S. They're an offspring of Sesame Workshop.
No.
Okay. So they're a study group and they've done research. They've been putting out a lot of quick research studies about lots of these issues regarding children learning and all these new media interactivity, etc. Personally, I took one of the survey and I thought the questions were very leading. I mean, there could only be one possible results to that study, no? But in general, one of the things I wanted to ask you, and I don't know if Mr. Bob Pratton is in the room today. Okay. Okay, right. There is a dichotomy in blogs, mainstream media, and parent and teacher discussions regarding that interactivity interrupts the reading experience. And that anything that interrupts this is a distraction that becomes an obstacle to learning. I'd like to know your position on this, and Mr. Pratton's too, because this is one of the main issues going on. For example, when people tend to recommend products that, for example, children's book apps, which is the area I'm in right now, because there's a tendency to think that the simpler and only just limited to text and maybe the audio voiceover, the simpler one of these children's book apps is, or something like Alice, the better it is because it has less distractions. And interactivity is seen as something actually negative because it only serves for fun purposes. Okay.
Yeah, interest. Yeah, interest.
Excuse me, Bill.
Oh, sorry.
This question has two answers. One is yours, and the other is from Robert Pratton that is there. So, Robert, you start first, and Bill will finish the...
Okay. I'm hiding behind this pillow. So I think, well, firstly, I don't agree that the interaction is negative or that it gets in the way. If we look at the Low Lifes project, in that project we had a novella, and at the end of some of the chapters, not all of them, but some of the chapters, we had a QR code, and we didn't say what that QR code did. But if you scanned it, it actually started to tell another story. And so when I look at interactivity and sort of different sort of platforms, I try to make it that each one is optional, and so that you're not dependent. And I mentioned this before. There's some books, they force you to, at the end of a chapter, they force you to go off and do something, like watch a video, and maybe you're not in the mood for that kind of media, because each media has a different kind of, feeling to it. And so I think forcing people to go off and do something is disruptive, it's a nuisance. So it's really in a design to try to make it optional. Like, for example, if you were reading a book and there was an email in there, an email address for the character, it's up to the reader then if they've decided, I'm going to email that character straight away, or if they're going to finish the end of the chapter or the end of the book and then think to themselves, oh, there was an email address there, I wonder what that does, and they go back to do it. So it's whatever they're in the mood for, and then each thing is additive rather than subtractive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it also comes back to your definition of reading, and I think someone who says that has a definition of reading in their head, and the definition of reading in their head is probably how they learned what reading was. The National Literacy Trust in England has produced several studies which demonstrate that kids who are online, kids who are on social networks, and kids who blog read more generally, and they write more, and that means reading of all forms. These things are not mutually exclusive. I mean, like many other people in this room, I can be on Twitter while I'm watching TV, or not really watching TV, but kind of watching TV, and catching up with the news, and reading the news feed along the bottom of the television screen, which is another piece of news from the one that's being read from the presenter. But equally, I could decide that I'm going to go and sit in my summer house and read 5 chapters of the novel that I'm reading. And as Robert said, depends what mood I'm in and what I want to do. They're not mutually exclusive. They're not mutually exclusive. It's not an either-or scenario. It's not a case of, do I want to have this kind of reading or do I want to have that kind of reading model? It's a case of, these are the texts which are around us in the world, and these are the texts which we will be reading. Some people may never read a novel, but it was ever thus. I mean, some people didn't ever read a novel in the 19th century, so, no different.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias a todos. Con esto terminamos la primera ponencia. Tenemos una pequeña pausa para el café. Os invito a todos los que estáis siguiendo por streaming la ponencia que os preparéis para la mesa redonda. En la mesa redonda vamos a hablar de otros elementos que de momento no han salido, que también tienen mucha relación con lo que es transmedia en la educación. Vamos a hablar de elementos como la gamificación, que mucha gente también cuestiona, los serious games, de qué manera las dinámicas de juego pueden y están aportando muchísimo, y de cómo algunas experiencias ya con nombres y apellido que han funcionado fuera de España perfectamente se podrían aplicar aquí. También hay gente ahora mismo aquí en la misma sala que si les diéramos el micrófono podrían contarnos lo que están haciendo. Entonces espero que alguno se anime y lo haga. Vale, muchísimas gracias a todos. Thank you, Bill. Everything. See you in half an hour. Nos vemos dentro de media hora.